All right. We have a big crowd today. So lots of folks coming back into the room here.
All right.
Yeah, as they do, Brennan, if you want to kick it off with announcements, and then I'll take it from there.
Sure. So on our end, we're working hard on our event this fall. It's as I've mentioned on previous calls, it's October 4th through the 6th in Boulder, Colorado. We have a limited amount of tickets. We've got a bunch of tickets sold. If you're interested, head over to transformworksummit.com and learn more and get on the list. We'd love to see some of you there. So that's it.
Awesome, Brandon. Thank you. So yeah, this today's session is just a little bit different in terms of format. Instead of having folks sort of give their 30-second pitch and everything. If you are new to the community or you haven't been on in a while, if you could just put your name and contact information, however you want to be contacted, while you're here in the chat, that would be great. Whether it's your LinkedIn profile or whatever, so we can connect with you there. That would be awesome. And yeah, I wanna get going. I'm super excited about today's session and today's conversation. This is a conversation that we've been wanting to have for a little while with some new voices in the room. It's, you know, I do want to preface it by saying the majority of freelancers today aren't on platforms. And I think we can all agree there's a huge opportunity for the platforms to really find some creative ways to support the whole freelancer. And for them to sort of explore how they can support a freelancer's growth in their business throughout the stages of that business, rather than just at the beginning, and how can platforms be a little bit more supportive and visible throughout the stages of that process. So I'm super excited to have Emma and Rob and Ben here. I would want you guys to take just, a minute or two, introduce yourselves to everyone here, talk about who you are, where you're based, and the value that you bring to your clients. So Emma, let's start with you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Emma Siemasko. I am a freelance content marketer. I am based in Silicon Valley in San Jose, California. I work pretty much exclusively with B2B tech clients on things like creating long-form content, content marketing strategy. I do a lot of case studies, subject matter expert interviews, working directly with engineers and bringing their insights to life. Yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'm looking forward to chatting today, hearing what your questions are and getting this discussion going. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Emma. Great to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Ben?
So I'm Ben Ross. I'm based in Brooklyn, and I'm part of the Open Assembly team. And really what I've done is a bunch of fractional work. So product strategy and customer discovery, fractional head of talent and chief of staff, COO type work. And I actually worked with Joel Topsick at a startup that I was recruited to by a former colleague from another startup, where I was recruited by another startup. So I've spent a lot of time with early stage startups from pre-seed to about Series B, and with a couple divergences into large enterprises.
Thanks, Ben. Glad you're here. Rob?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Perry. I am the token platform freelancer here. I am a digital marketing consultant and copywriter working exclusively on Upwork for the past 6 years, well, Upwork and referrals. So that's basically my home, and that's where I do my business. I do a range of services, mostly copywriting, but copywriting is kind of the carrot that I use to get people in the door, right? So I present myself as a copywriter. But once I see what's happening, a lot of the clients who find on Upwork really need more general digital marketing consultant. They think that they need a copywriter, but once you get in the door, you find out that they've got bigger needs than the ones that they thought they had. So that's where I'm able to really add value and sell my services on the platform. But that's me.
Thanks. I think that's the case with a lot of freelancers, right? We hire them to do a specific job, and we realize all the other skill sets that they bring to the table. Thank you all for being here. These folks are a wealth of knowledge. We're going to hear about their experiences and their insights and how they're thinking about the future of their industry and their businesses. So very highly successful freelancers that have a huge voice in their community. So, so I kind of want to kick things off a little bit with talking about, have each of you talk about like what have been the best client sources for each of you to grow your businesses, and can you share with us either a percentage of clients or revenue or some anecdotal data of work that have come from platforms specifically? Go ahead. I don't need to call on you. You can just.
Sure, I'll jump in. So for about 10 years, I've been freelancing. My first client was through a headhunter, and I did that project for about 90 days because I was a temporary head of talent while somebody else was on garden leave. And then that led to just referral after referral. So I would say, it's been 0% on the talent platforms, and it's been almost entirely either former investors, former colleagues, former managers. It's all been referral based.
I'm in a similar boat. My business has mostly been referral based. I was in a position where I worked in-house and I was working on a lot of partnerships, and I would write things for these partnerships, and I had these partners say, oh, well, can you do more writing for us too? And that sort of like a snowball sort of started with that, similar to how Ben described. I have a little experience with platforms, so I've done a tiny bit of work on Upwork. I also used to get work through a platform that I don't know if it's even existing anymore, called Contently. And then the other area that is sometimes fruitful or has been fruitful for me as a freelancer is working with agencies. So that sometimes feels like working with a platform in the sense that you're kind of on their bench and they kind of source a bunch of projects for you.
Yeah, thanks, Emma.
Yeah, and so I've been on Upwork for 6 years, and like I said, that's my primary source of clients. I would say that for the first 3 to 4 years, I was probably 90% clients through Upwork. Then I went through a 2-year period where I was actually closer to 80% referral business, and I kind of stopped working on the platform quite so much because I had good referral clients and I didn't have to pay fees. But then over the past 6 to 9 months, I've actually shifted back to Upwork, and I would say that this year so far, I'm probably about 80% of my income through the platform. So it's gone up and down for me, but the platform has been a big part of it. And even that referral business came to me thanks to people I met through the platform. So 100% of my income can be tied back to the platform in one way or another.
Yeah, Rob, that's so interesting. And that's a great segue too. What have been some of the features or attributes or parts of Upwork that have made you shift back to it after maybe there's been a lull?
Well, I guess 2 things. One, it's familiar, right? It's what I know. And once you've developed any sort of a lead source, it's easier for you to go back out there because you already know the thing, right? If I had been sending cold emails for the past 5 years, then I would be really good at cold emails by now, and I would just run out and send cold emails. But in this case, I know Upwork. I know how to vet clients. I know how to search the platform to find the clients that I want, and I have a long work history there. So I'm top rated plus. I have 100% work approval rating. So when I reach out to people, they can see my work history. They can see how much money I've made on previous jobs, and all of that works in my favor. I've got a lot of social proof there already built into the platform that makes it much easier than me reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn, where I haven't been super active over the past few years. I'm not going to see a lot of posts and a lot of engagement, right? My business, for better or for worse, exists primarily through the platform.
Yeah, Rob, social proof. We could have a whole conversation just on that. Thanks for sharing that with us. Corey, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm curious how you've seen interacting with the platforms, and I would say your competition, right? Other freelancers has changed like pre-pandemic versus kind of where we are today. Has it become easier? Have the platforms become, I guess, more in tune with what you're looking for, or has it just kind of been flooded over time?
I would say that from my experience has been that the platforms, I've only worked on Upwork, so I can't comment on other platforms, but Upwork appears to have become more competitive in terms of there are a lot of people competing for less jobs, at least at the high end, the good jobs. That's been my experience. I've still been successful in landing some, but with 6 years of experience, it's easier. Like I would believe for somebody just coming in and trying to get started, at least at a high level on Upwork, it's probably harder today than it was when I started, and probably harder than it was pre-pandemic. And I'm wondering, personally, if it's going to get even harder as this year goes on. More layoffs in the tech sector, really talented people who had really good jobs. A lot of those people are probably going freelance. So it may be, it may get harder. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that and say that even though I've been freelancing for 8 years now, running a very successful business, and one of my hesitations to going onto the platform is becoming like just a face in the sea. And I think Rob benefits from having been there. He alluded to this, having been there for 6 years, having all the social proof built up. And if I start going on a platform, I don't have any of that. I can say I've been copywriting for 8 years and I've worked with all of these fancy clients, but I've also seen people like copy profiles on Upwork, and there can be a bit of smoke and mirrors and verification issues. I'm not sure how platforms today are handling that, but I've heard a few freelancers say, oh my gosh, this is like me on Upwork, but it's not actually me. So there's maybe some interesting issues there, but I know I have that hesitation because I'm like, why do I want to put myself out there among a sea of people when I can do more relationship-based work, at least because I don't have that foundation that Rob, for example, has.
Yeah, I would mirror that and add one other dimension, because I've been on both sides of this. I've been a freelancer hired, and I've also tried to hire freelancers at scale for various things like marketing, development, product work. And one of the things that I found is how to really differentiate the quality, because everybody's values, everybody's goal type is different. And so when in doubt, I've often defaulted to, did I work with somebody who knew that person? So even if I found them on Upwork, I might ping, say, what did you think of this colleague? The other part is there's the tyranny of choice, right? What I call, there's a lot of quality people out there. And as a buyer, you go, oh my God, am I making a mistake? Am I being cheap? Am I paying too little, too high, right? And so I think there's a lot of improvements that could be made on both sides of the matching process. And it's not an easy problem, because to the point made earlier by Emma, right? Credentialing, verification of identity, these are all massive problems. And so to expect a platform to do something that LinkedIn hasn't done exceptionally well, I don't think is fair, but I think it's important to just recognize these issues exist. And then as a community come together, say, we recognize these 3 large dimensions of the problem. How do we collaborate to do things like unified identity, billing transparency, fairness? So those are questions that I don't have answers to, but are reasons why I found friction.
Yeah, that's fair, Ben. And we'll dive in a little bit deeper into that in a minute. Balaji, you had a question in the chat?
Yeah, I think the question probably is, we'll get to that, but I think it's fundamentally, it's just this dichotomy that you see, like some freelancers are all in on the platforms, others are not. It just makes it very difficult for clients to think about, when to go to platforms, when not to go to platforms. And it's not even clear as to, is there some demographic, some experience differential where after which you don't go to platforms and before that you do, or is it just, it's just a happenstance on your first project worked out well on Upwork, and after that, or a platform, and then you just stay after that. It does feel like in some way a religion where either you're in it or you're not in it.
I think it's not. I worked in-house and I hired freelancers, and we used like a total mix depending on what the project was. We would hire like an agency or consultants for certain projects. For other projects, we would be like, this is pretty straightforward. We should go to Upwork or People Per Hour, or one of these platforms at the time. This was several years ago. There's many more options now, but I think we really just made the decision on whether to use the platform based on the complexity of the project. And I'm not saying this is necessarily the right way, but if it was something pretty straightforward, like we needed a graphic designer to design an ebook or something like that, that was like a pretty straightforward ask. And that was something that was easier to go on Upwork and get, or a platform and get that support. Whereas something that was more complex, like building out a marketing campaign, we might try and find a consultant or an agency. I don't think there's a perfect formula. I'm curious what Rob would say about it, because he alluded to kind of starting with copywriting and then, expanding that. But that's my take, is I don't really think it's a religion either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to look at it, is it from the client side or from the freelancer side. From my side, it's definitely not a religion in that I see the downsides of the platform, and I'm aware every day of the fact that there are negatives to my business being so attached to this platform, especially a platform like Upwork that tends to be pretty hands-off in terms of, I've worked with them for 6 years. I've never spoken to a person. I think it's impossible to speak to a person from my perspective. So, that's concerning to me. If I violate terms of service, or somebody claims that I violate terms of service, that 6 years can go away like that, right? And I'm not even sure who I can contact to get it back. So that's definitely a major concern with Upwork, and one that I think a lot of people have. There's definitely a perception that I'm getting off topic here, off question. So I'll circle back. But from my perspective, I think that a lot of people work both on and off. People who work on and off, I think it tends to be people who don't have enough business off the platform to sustain themselves. They keep coming back because they need that hit, right? And so that's not necessarily a fortunate thing. For clients, I find that it depends on the type of client, but yeah, it's a lot like what Emma said, in that some of them, will come to the platform when they need quick work, right? Other ones, there are definitely some people who don't know where else to go, and they just keep hiring there and trying and failing and trying and failing, and then they come to work with me and like, wow, I've been looking for you for months. Where have you been? So it's a hit or miss experience for people, but a lot of clients don't know where else to go. From a freelancer's perspective, I think some people might be all in. I haven't met a lot of people who are completely like, I'm always all in on Upwork, because the truth is that we all are aware of the risks that are involved.
And I think, to add to Rob's point, probably in the majority of the history pre-COVID, freelancers were used what I call the barbell strategy. Super high end, super low end, right? All of that middle ground, which are your builders, your operators, your kind of rocks versus your superstars or your grunts. Because if you need a very specific, very privileged set of information, access relationships, those people are not going to work for you, but they will work for you for 4 hours to get you a meeting. Like we have a project in the works where we're helping a company enable exactly that kind of super high-end consultancy. And then I am a hammer, or I have a bunch of nails and I need a hammer. But when you talk about like trying to shape work, especially because a lot of companies don't actually understand what they need. They have some sort of business goal, but they're kind of poor at defining how that work gets done. And I saw this a lot with agile consultancies and big consulting firms, like literally everyone, they write into their contracts, if we need to change scope, we have, X period, X dollars. So now imagine compressing that from years to months to I need somebody for 2 weeks to a month. So it's just a very hard nut to crack from how you shape work. And so certain types of work really lend itself. And it's part of why I think OA has had a good reputation, because OA had understood how to decouple work, what is suitable for taskifying. But again, it is a very challenging problem. And I think it's a super cool data problem.
I think there's also a budgetary component to this, where like, it's pretty easy to try something out on Upwork for not that much money, or again, another platform. I'm just thinking of Upwork because Rob has been talking about it, but a lot of platforms, you can do something, you can try somebody out very easily. They're not sending you a super lengthy proposal and trying to get you to engage in thousands and thousands of dollars. So I think companies that are feeling more experimental, they don't know exactly what they want, that those companies, are maybe trying out some of the freelancers on Upwork to see what might make the most sense without having to make huge commitments and investments.
Yeah, Emma. And then you have folks on the opposite end of the spectrum that have experimented. And to your earlier point, right, when you were hiring freelancers, when you were working in-house, you were doing it for less complex work. And the market has really matured since then. And now we have platforms like Vicoland and Distributed that are outsourcing hiring freelance teams, which is actually the topic of our next community call on June 1st. So don't miss it. Thank you so much. Alina, you had your hand up, and then Maxine.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I represent freelance business community, and this is community that attracts freelancers of different types and sorts and professions. And most of the time, these people are not on the platforms, perhaps a small percentage. So we hear voices of freelancers who are not working at the platforms, and we hear what they say about platforms. And quite often the notion is that Well, platform is something which is not for me because this is very cheap. That's what we hear. It's very difficult to many people on platforms. And when you ask which platforms they know, of course, they call these big names like that we know, all of us. And I think the problem here is that the community and freelancers out there, they need to be explained that these are not only these big names that we know. I don't want to mention them, maybe they're present here, but also other new generation platforms that actually taking you by hand and helping you to find clients. I personally, in order to be able to demonstrate that indeed it works differently these days, have registered myself on several platforms just to see how it works. I'm a consultant with a big experience, so I want to see how much work I'm going to get from those platforms who are position themselves as different to those that we know. And also from a perspective of being a customer, if I need work to be done cheaply, I'll go to Fiverr and find someone who can do it for me. This is crazy, right? But that should not be the case. If I need to have a bigger project accomplished, then I'll be looking in the community for people who can join me. So that's just probably two sides perspective to bear in mind, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Alina. Maxine, and then Balaji, and then San.
Yeah, really interesting. So I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Pick My Brain. We're a knowledge marketplace. And my question is actually, we're starting to, number one, build knowledge marketplaces for specific communities. So communities can actually hire within their communities more easily, because I feel like hiring part of the paid membership groups I'm a part of, like knowing that they're all hiring, I already have that know, like, and trust, and that community is building more revenue streams. So have you guys seen, or what are your thoughts on building these platforms specifically for community so that community members can hire other community members? And then second, the thing that I'm looking to differentiate from Upwork, I feel very transactional when I charge my time per hour. And I don't like to charge per hour, as I like to set the bar, and I don't like marketplaces that drive the price down globally. What are your guys' thoughts, or have you seen any platforms or had any experience in setting a minimum bar of minimum, if someone's looking to hire me, I'm charging for 50 hours, or I'm starting at 5,000 and up, creating boundaries so that you can attract higher quality work and feel a little bit less transactional. Just thoughts on moving the bar up instead of having it driven down because it's a global pool of talent.
One thing that occurred, oh, go ahead.
I think there's evidence in that strategy, right? Like what you're ultimately going to do is reduce your top of funnel from inbound, but by doing that and saying, here is our right to win, here is our community, here is my product strategy. If you do a good job marketing that and actually delivering on that, then you'll do what the ladders tried to do, right? The ladders tried to do this 20 something years ago, where they said, we don't want to be Monster. We want to be the job board for only 100K plus jobs. And through all sorts of product blunders and, customer experience blunders, they failed. But I think it was an interesting idea. And it was one of the ideas I was going to suggest later of, even if you have a giant brand with a huge top of funnel, by giving people the opportunity to graduate into a more premium experience with, this is like the private banking experience. Once you're, $5 million or more in net worth, JP Morgan calls you and says, hello, Mr. Ross, and I'm not. So, but hello, Mr. or Miss somebody. These are all these other services you can get, like better 401k plans, better investments, better, savings plan, literally everything. So I think that's a fantastic idea. But you have to understand you are going to shrink your total addressable market initially, but you could have so much more retention and engagement.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get the clients to show up, then that's the key, I think. For me, I've seen people who have tried to go that direction and develop more premium marketplaces for freelancers. And I've always been somewhat skeptical. One, because I felt like the competition was going to be higher, right? I'd have a harder time standing out there. And then two, they can't compete with the number of clients that are coming into Upwork. Now, most of the clients coming to Upwork aren't good clients, but the ones that are, I've got a better chance of landing them because I'm not going up against other people who've been doing the same thing I've been doing for maybe 10, 15, 20 years, right? So I did actually sign up for one a few years ago, and then I didn't find any jobs in there that really even interested me, so I gave it up. So as long as you can if you can build that community, if you're successful at building it, I think it's a model that could definitely work. For me, I haven't seen it work yet for me. And when it comes to the other piece of it, in terms of setting limits on what you're willing to work at, I mean, there are ways to work the system in Upwork. For instance, I haven't worked an hourly contract on Upwork in 3 years. So all of my projects are fixed price. I have to bid on most of my projects at an hourly rate. But then once we get into a conversation, I always convert it to a fixed price project because it works out best for both sides, right? They know what they're getting for a fixed price. I know what I need to deliver. We both end up relatively happy usually at the end of the day. And also, you know, like I set my profile price at $200 an hour. So I am already sort of price signaling, right? People who want a job done for $20 don't send me invitations, and we don't have to communicate, right? I've already established kind of what my minimum is. And I won't take a 1 hour job. I'll talk that. I don't say that on my profile, but I'll say that in a conversation. So once you can set limits, and I think that most people are afraid to, especially at the beginning level. And I didn't set good limits, have good boundaries when I was, you know, a first time freelancer either. But it is possible, even on a platform like Upwork, to set boundaries and enforce boundaries if you take the right strategic approach and if there's enough demand for your services.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rob. Very insightful. And I think there's a conversation around how platforms can help educate freelancers about how to know their worth in terms of setting those prices. Emma, did you have something you wanted to contribute there earlier?
I think actually these two covered it. I was just going to add that I think that's kind of when I alluded to agencies earlier. I think the agencies sometimes do the work with creating this personal relationship and saying like, oh, when we work together, you know, a marketing strategy is going to cost X, and they've kind of done all of this sales stuff. And I think the challenge with the platform is that there's not really like an opportunity to sell or explain value in the same way if you're just sort of seeing someone's profile. So I think that I don't have an answer to that, but I think that remains a challenge with creating premium marketplaces.
Yeah, it's incredibly well said. Balaji, you had your hand up, and then San.
And I think I'm just following up with what Emma and Ben and everybody said. I think it's, if the biggest job, at least from a buyer's perspective, that the marketplaces, the most successful marketplaces do with us is they generate demand on our side. They have multiple contact points within the firm, and they're constantly probing to see what work is going on. Where can they open up demand? And I think the pure self-service by buyers results in what Emma just described, which is way lower transactional amounts, you know, $1,000 projects or maybe $1,500 project. But if I need a contractor where I want to spend $100,000, I need to speak to someone to ensure that I know what I'm getting. As many of you rightly said, I'm not very clear. It's not you don't spend $100,000 unless it's a Ferrari, because you know exactly what you're getting. But if you're getting work done, there is a lot of like variability in it, and things will go up and down in scope and everything. And those tend to need at least some level of account managers or some level of project managers that need to interface with you, and then go find the community members. And I think, unfortunately, not unfortunately, the Upworks of the world have stayed in that average project size of 2,000 to 5,000, with Fiverr around 100, 200 bucks. The staffing firms stay on the, you know, $40,000, $50,000 per year. But the marketplaces in the middle that have scaled the most are companies like TopTal, BrainTrust, and others that are marketplace in the back end and a project manager in the front end, where you can get the benefit of a marketplace, but without needing to lower the unit cost or the unit transaction value. So I think, you know, Upwork and Fiverr have made a choice to stay on the transactional side, and TopTal and others have made a choice to sit in the middle. So it's all about, you know, what is the intent of each of these marketplaces in the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. San.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, we've been talking a lot about acquisition, and I was just thinking as everyone was talking, this is sort of microcosm with the movie industry, right? Which is, you know, to some extent an industry of freelancers, but in the movie industry they work in crews, and if you think about that, it offers two things. One, it offers really successful teams that know each other's, know how to collaborate, but it also offers multiple points of acquisition if you've got a 5 people that work really well together, a new job might come from any of those 5 people versus just one. So I'm just wondering if we're seeing anything in the broader marketplace and the platforms that are sort of serving that notion of teams, not just in terms of value for a client, because most business problems are complex nowadays and they require more than one individual to solve, but also in terms of value of acquisition for the individual freelancers, the individual talent.
Yeah, Salam, that's a great point. In our community, we, distributed. Cal runs a great company that's team based out of the UK, and then obviously a team that's got a lot of notoriety out of New York that's raised a ton of money that exclusively builds teams. But I think that's a trend that's happening. At least, I don't know, Barry, you might want to jump in here too because you're more experienced working with the clients themselves. But I get the sense that more clients are going to be. Actually, just a segue, Balaji's great writing on how AI will affect the freelance market really means that I think we're going to go from, roles to be filled to tasks to be done. And when the tasks to be done, it lends itself to team orientation, right? Like I need this fully baked deliverable that happens. I don't know, Barry, do you have any insight from some of the great work we're doing with clients and, connecting them with platforms?
I'm being completely honest. I stepped away and now I've come back again. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. We're just talking to Stan's question was about teams and the rise of teams. And I pointed out distributed and a team. And I wanted to just, because I think you've got such a finger on the pulse of what's happening, with clients, and that idea that, that Balaji brought up, I think so elegantly in his writing on, going from roles to be filled to tasks to be done. And, if it's tasks to be done, is it putting together teams so tasks can get done from the total task?
I think it's a sort of interesting segue between where we are as an industry between, outsourcing, where a company was very comfortable putting a contract in place for a team to deliver something for them, but it was sort of old and analog and cumbersome and took a long time. And then, staffing industry, where you're looking for an individual, we're in the sort of cross-section or the intersection of those two areas. So companies like Distributed have taken a freelance delivery model, packaged it through a platform and deliver outcomes on projects, on digital software development projects, which are competing with outsourcers, but are, 40% cheaper and, 50% quicker. I mean, that's a really good way of a customer who's not comfortable going to an Upwork to get something big and complicated done, going to a Distributed where they know they've got flexible as a service, variable, switch it up and down, but they can pay for an outcome. I mean, that's, sensible. I get that. But also on the other side, enterprise customers that we work with who are used to working with Randstad or Kelly Services or Adecco, whatever, they have a person to speak to. They're held by the hand, they're guided. They don't have to do it all online. And that's what they're comfortable with. So I think it will take a while before enterprise customers will go directly to a platform to get something done at scale and spend a lot of money, and which is why TopTal has done so incredibly well, because they blend, and others, Braintrust and others, they blend holding you by the hand and giving you a white glove concierge service with a platform model. And I think that's the secret. We're not, generative AI will change things inevitably, but we're a while away from big enterprises just typing what they want in a Google style interface and being happy to spend, tens of thousands of pounds or dollars on it. It's going to take a little while.
Can I raise a point from Link made a comment that I thought was really good, where he's describing the newness of industry, all these things, like not just that, the complexity of work, the language used is so variable that it's very hard for people to do apples to apples. I've seen 5 or 6 different types of titles for people that manage this work, whether it's contingent workforce, whether it's freelance, whether it's gig, so it's already a big enough thing to say what is the same across geographies, work types, contexts. So if the movement wants to start really coalescing and becoming a big, dominating and taking share away from traditional consulting, I think there has to be some set of naming conventions, standards by which people start to describe things. Then the next thing is there has to be a second layer of identity, security, privacy, right? Because why would I give my information to a platform unless there's wild validation? And frankly, until this year, I would have trusted if they had ad budget, I could trust them. But we've seen that's not the case, because you give your name, your payment information, you give enough to get breached, hacked. Somebody could create a fake version of you, like was said earlier. So there has to be a certification process, right? Like, do I trust this platform? Are they viable from a business perspective, from a privacy perspective? And so I think starting to think broadly across all the participants, the buyers, the freelancers, the platforms, we have to build that trust, because with trust comes, okay, if I make a mistake, it's not the end of the world and I don't get fired. Because ultimately, a lot of people make decisions based on fear. Every time we lost business, it was, well, Pivotal Labs is a bigger name versus when I was doing business with Stride. Stride, you've done great work, but Pivotal has done these things. And so I would love to see the ecosystem get together through conferences, through working arrangements. Every other industry has done this. Advertising has done it with OpenAP. Finance did it with Fixed Protocol. This industry is huge, but is still fragmented because the way we describe is so variable. So thanks, Link, for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hopefully
Can
the
I
book
jump in and
just finished.
piggyback on that? You know, and it was funny, I was laughing about Ashley and I working when Open Assembly was just kind of new and we were just kind of starting out, you know, trying to create a vocabulary list for the types of freelancers and how they describe themselves, not their skills, but the types. And I stopped at just about 50, and I've continued over the last 3 years. And you know, I had also mentioned that there's well over 1,000 platforms around the world that connect freelancers, when 4 years ago you could find like your key 5 to 10. And so the noise and the chaos and the amount of webinars and the amount of things that are, I mean, LinkedIn used to be a place to connect with people that were, you know, you could reach out to a CEO of a platform, you could reach out to a CEO of a company and get direct feedback and have a conversation. And but now there's so many barriers because there's so many people that have launched into the freelance world trying to lead their own businesses, be their own consultants, which has now lessened the value of the actual term consultant from what it used to mean versus what it is now, just a general, you're a consultant. What does that mean? And so now it's all of these words are losing their meaning and losing their quality and losing their value within the different platforms and how they use it. So the noise and chaos on how they can scale themselves, where they used to go to work for a company and there was a roadmap, there was Workday, there's all these programs. But now the noise out there, what programs do you use? LinkedIn's constantly marketing me on how I can be a thought leader and how I can do this and pay me for that. And it's an absolute chaotic mess, where the actual percentage of time with a freelancer actually doing work and generating revenue versus the amount of time it takes for them to follow up on their contract for their checks, you know, to follow up on this email, follow up on that email, for the unpaid time sits somewhere around 40%. So they might be putting in 12 hours in a day, but they're only getting paid for 7. And so there has to be more coordination among the platforms to not see themselves as competition, but in a way of partnering to help support freelancers where they need it. Because this is the next thing. 30 million freelancers last year joined this industry. You know that Goodwill Industries, they have career centers. They're a multi-billion-dollar company globally who's focused on career. They only had 37,000 people use their career centers last year versus 30 million people enter the freelance economy. We've got to start working with those folks that are on the other side, that are the, you know, kind of late adopters of it, to say, hey, we need to do more development with freelancers to help them make a career out of this instead of it just being a side gig. Thank you. That's all. There's my thanks for listening to my soapbox.
Thanks. Like, no, you make 2 great points, and I think this is a good segue into kind of the crux of what we wanted to talk about, right? The need for common language across the whole board. And you know, and I think a huge part of that, I mean, Ben, even when we were talking about this conversation in the beginning, right, and thinking about what we talk about today, you shared a great story about even not like figuring out who we are and how we portray ourselves as freelancers on a platform when it comes to identity, but like the boxes that sometimes you're forced to be in, right? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I am both a beneficiary and obviously have struggled because I call myself a startup athlete, right? It's that T shape where you do a bunch of things and maybe you do one thing well. And platforms are really good if you're a hammer and you're the best hammer, you can find work all day easily. But like, I get paid to solve problems. And I know that sounds really squishy and generic, but a lot of why I spend the time I spend selecting my clients is I go, is the business interesting? Do they have a good team in place? I think about it like a VC. And I want to select my clients based on, if I do good work with them, can we grow together? Will they become a big customer for me? Or even frankly, long-term, is this where I want to make my home? Right? Because as much as I love the variety of freelancing and getting to learn and work with incredible people, you know, I am getting older, and my wife, she always says to me, when are you going to settle? And so I think there are some significant constraints that I think technology could be used to improve, which is, how do you take somebody squishy like me that I've solved product strategy, revenue strategy, operations, talent acquisition, and then really what I do is I join people together. So it's not easy to quantify that in a platform sense, but every customer I've ever been to, they go, we don't always know exactly what you're doing, but you seem to be moving us forward in ways that we find valuable. You're worth more than we pay you. So cool, we'll keep paying you.
Thanks, Ben.
Ben,
Yeah, you
Ben,
make a great point.
Ben,
Yes,
when you figure out, Ben, when you figure out when it's time to settle, will you let me know?
Yeah, let me know too, Ben. That'd be great. Yeah, I think that's a good segue too, right? And so we've talked a little bit about this, and Rob and Emma, you have alluded to this, but is there, like, your gut reaction? Like, what about platforms could they provide that would make you want to invest more of your time and energy there?
I think someone had mentioned in the chat something about like the human aspect of it, which I think is important, because I know we live in a world now where you can get fully onboarded to these platforms without any human being involved. And I just, I struggle with that, because it's not really the way that I do business. I feel like people do business with me because they know me and they know that I'm good, or someone tells them that. And I just feel like there's all this sort of pressure if I don't talk to a person, because it's almost just like sending your resume out into a void. So I feel like a human touch is really important. And then I also think, and this like never happens with the platform, I feel like even when if there is a human touch, it's often like, oh, we'll get you on board and we'll get everything set up. You sound like such a great fit. And then it's like complete crickets. And that is a negative experience as well. So I guess what I'm maybe getting at is that I think early success counts for a lot. So like if somebody goes on one of these platforms, they're going to try it out for a couple of weeks and see if they get anywhere. And if they can't get anywhere at that beginning point, they're just going to drop off. So I think having like really solid human-led engagement programs and really helping to prioritize getting new people to the platform, like into work and jobs right away, is a really good way to retain them and for them to see the value in it. And I think that there's many ways to skin a cat. You could do that in a total number of ways. And I think there's also freelancers that may come onto your platform where you're like, this person doesn't seem very good. Like they're not a VIP that we want to roll out the red carpet for. But I think when someone that you perceive as good is coming, you need to do everything you can to make them see the value in it as quickly as possible. Those are some of my thoughts. I'm curious what Rob and Ben have to say too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Emma's really onto something with the human aspect, not just in interacting with clients, but specifically with the platform itself, right? Like I already spoke about how I've been on Upwork for 6 years and I've never spoken to a person, and I don't think it's possible to speak to a person, right? Like that puts a freelancer in a very precarious situation. I don't blame any successful freelancer who has their own client streams for not wanting to get on Upwork for that specific reason, if not others. So that's one thing. There's no human element. It doesn't feel like they appreciate you or they want you there even. Like you're just an interchangeable piece, which that's how our economy works. It's not going to be a big surprise that a platform doesn't value you as a human being, right? But at the same time, you would think that as you achieve some level of success, you're making their clients happy, to continue to bring them money, that there would be some level of recognition, or maybe some level of even like a VIP service where you can speak to a person if you needed to, or where you don't have this constant fear that you might get kicked off the platform. And and yeah, I mean, basically you get a badge, right? This name is badge, right? You put on, that's on your profile, and that's the recognition that you get. Good job, guy. And so beyond that, I think that, there has been a conversation about fees on Upwork recently. I don't want to get into the Upwork, specific thing, and we're talking about an industry as a whole. But beyond that, I think that better job of vetting clients. So, and if there was a platform that I knew I could succeed on that was doing a better job of vetting clients, that would definitely be a better experience for freelancers. In Upwork, it's kind of like this free for all where the best freelancers are thrown in with the worst, and somebody can post a job saying they want an expert, but they want that expert for $5 an hour. Right? There's no connect between what they're saying, what the client says they want, and what they are actually offering. And the clients don't seem to be watched or regulated. I mean, I don't think there's anybody watching any of this stuff, quite honestly, at Upwork on a human level. It's all kind of triggered by some sort of algorithm. So there's no sense of humanness to that particular platform. So I think that would help. But honestly, as long as freelancers are having success on their own terms, it's going to be hard to get them to any platform. It's going to have to take a really, really persuasive marketing campaign and a really different model to pull the best freelancers onto any sort of a platform, because there's just no incentive for them to do it if they're already, their calendar's full and they're happy with where they are. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Well, Ben, I was just going to say this is going to be really quick, but freelancers are acutely aware that the platforms make money from the businesses that are coming onto them and hiring, and that the platforms are not really incentivized to treat freelancers very well. And I think that is one stumbling block I always have. I'm like, well, I'm not paying you anything. Like it's just, and obviously the business is kind of oriented towards who is paying. And I think we feel that acutely, and I don't want to take up more time, but Ben, go ahead.
So what I was going to say is Uber figured this out, right? They charge 37%, but what they do is they offer a lot of tools like, you get rated as a passenger. And if you're a top rated Uber driver, you get matched to the top rated passengers. And then they're starting to think about things like routes. I think they're a terrible company in a lot of the things they do, but they figured that piece out pretty well. Now, there are other things that you could do, right? Like I had to buy liability insurance. It was a pain. I had to go through all sorts of processes. So if I'm a freelance platform and I have all these affiliate offers where you should monetize, right? You're taking the time to onboard people, to market to them, to show them opportunity. You've gotten their attention. And as long as what you do isn't spammy, right? It's cool. Here are a few options. Let me give you some explanation of benefits. Let me help you find a good liability insurance provider. Let me give you the maximum return with a minimum expense. Here is a pool of getting healthcare, right? Healthcare is so confusing. So these are like very specific bolt-on things that you could do. Then, okay, great. We'll easily integrate your 1099 statement with the provider of your choice to do your taxes. Oh, by the way, here is this cluster of benefits where even though you're a freelancer, you're part of millions of freelancers that we have buying power to get things almost like a PEO would. So this is where you have to get like a little bit longer term greedy and say, what are marketplace offerings we could build? So that way a freelancer goes, okay, for my 37% plus my attention, I get real tangible benefit of essentially you are my CFO, COO, and now I can just delight my clients. And I'm a little different in that I love technology. What I want is a very good onboarding via technology, which routes me to a human quickly. I don't just want to talk to a human. And then once I enter my information, share it everywhere, but give me ownership and permission. I give permission, boom, terms of service, toggle switches, publish everywhere. Cool, right? Like it should work for me, not the other way around.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I mean, freelancers and entrepreneurs, folks have that's a community of people who have learned how to be resourceful and have to go find that stuff that is tangential and crucial to their business. They've had to go find it on their own. Imagine what platforms could do to sort of lighten that load a little bit. That's very well said. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. The chat was so active, I couldn't keep up with it at all. So I'm so glad. It looks like some meetings have been set with folks from today. So I'm super happy to hear that. bring in Rob, Ben, and Emma for a project. They've got so much more to share and so much more to bring to the table. Thank you to everyone who joined today. As I mentioned, June 1st is our next community call. We're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of building freelancer teams. So it's a natural progression from our conversation today. And then in the next day or so on the blog, you'll see the recording from today. I'm going to have to go listen to everything. You'll see the show notes in there. So thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us today. It was a really fruitful discussion.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks for
Awesome.
organizing.
Yeah, love you guys.
Take care. Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.